Chapter 1, Dust on the Road. The sun bled low across the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of fire and rust. Heat shimmered off the ground, blurring the line between earth and sky, and dust clung to every breath. Colt McGraw tugged the brim of his hat lower against the glare, his horse's steady hoofbeats the only sound breaking the stillness of the evening. He wasn't looking for trouble. He never was. Trouble had a way of sniffing him out, though. And when he spotted the figure by the roadside, his gut clenched the way it always did before fate changed course. A woman sat in the dirt like a forgotten ghost, rags hanging off her frame, hair tangled, skin pale beneath layers of grit. She didn't raise her head when Colt rode past, didn't beg or cry out, just sat there, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself like she was the last soul left in the world. Colt's hand twitched on the reins. "Not your fight," he muttered under his breath, urging his horse forward. The trail stretched long and lonely ahead, promising him silence and a bedroll under the stars. That should have been enough. But the sound came, soft, cracked, like a twig breaking in the wind. A cough. He pulled up hard, horse snorting at the sudden halt. Dust swirled around him in a golden haze. Colt cursed, turning in the saddle to glance back. The woman was trying to stand, legs trembling under her like they didn't belong to her anymore. She collapsed back down, arms covering her face as though ashamed. Colt swore again, louder this time. He spun his horse around, spurs ringing as he trotted back. When he drew up beside her, she flinched, eyes wide and hollow. Up close, she looked younger than he thought, though the weight of suffering had carved deep shadows into her features. "You lost?" Colt asked, voice gruff but not unkind. Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint rasp, too dry to speak. Colt leaned down, studying her with that hard stare of his. He could have kept on riding. Should have. But the way her fingers clutched the dirt, the way she held herself together with the last of her pride, it struck something in him. With a slow exhale, he tipped his hat back and let the corner of his mouth curl in a wry smile. "Well, darling," he drawled, "you want a ring or a ride?" For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the setting sun and the lonely road. Her eyes flickered, confusion giving way to something else. Hope, faint but alive. Colt extended his hand down to her. Dust floated in the dying light, and the prairie held its breath. Against all odds, she reached for him. Chapter 2, A Stranger's Kindness. The town of Dry Creek was a place of creaking signboards, weather-beaten storefronts, and a constant haze of dust that never quite settled. Colt McGraw guided his horse down the main street. The woman he'd found slumped behind him in the saddle. Her head leaned against his back, too weak to hold itself upright. But she hadn't let go of him since the moment she climbed up. The saloon doors swung open as he dismounted, their hinges squealing. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke, whiskey, and the twang of an old fiddle. Chatter paused when Colt strode through, boots striking the warped planks, spurs jingling like little warnings. The woman clung to his arm, her ragged dress stirring whispers. "McGraw's picked up a stray," someone muttered from a card table. "Looks more like a beggar than a lady," another man chuckled, lifting his glass. Colt ignored them. He led her to a corner table away from the worst of the noise. She sank into the chair like her bones might break under the weight of sitting. Her hands trembled as they rested in her lap, clutching fabric that wasn't worth a dime. He flagged down the saloon girl. "Stew, bread, and whiskey," he said, dropping a silver coin on her tray. "Now." When the food arrived, Lena, he'd called her name in a whisper on the ride-in, stared at the bowl as though she'd forgotten what a hot meal looked like. She lifted the spoon with shaking fingers, sipping cautiously. Tears pricked her eyes at the first taste, though she blinked them away quick. Colt leaned back, arms folded, eyes never leaving her. He wasn't one to coddle, but the sight of her eating stirred something low in his chest. "You running from someone?" he asked. Her spoon paused halfway. She swallowed hard, not answering, gaze fixed on the wood grain of the table. "Fair enough," Colt said after a moment. "Ain't none of my business, yet. But if you're sitting here under my watch, you'll be left alone." The promise wasn't loud, but it carried. A drunken ranch hand from the bar staggered over anyway, his grin sour with whiskey. "Well, now, what do we got here?" "Little Miss Raggedy-Doll. Don't reckon you belong with the likes of him." Lena stiffened, shrinking back. Colt's hand rested lazy-like on his revolver, though his eyes were cold as the steel itself. "Best finish your drink elsewhere," Colt drawled, voice smooth as gravel. The man froze under that look, then spat on the floor and stumbled back toward the bar. The saloon's chatter picked up again, though the weight of Colt's warning still lingered in the air. Lena lifted her gaze to him, eyes wide, uncertain. He tipped his hat, slow and deliberate. "Told you. Under my watch, you're safe." For the first time that night, her lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. Chapter 3, Shadows in Her Past. The night stretched long in Dry Creek. Coyotes yipped from the hills. Their cries carried to the cracked shutters of the saloon's upstairs rooms. Colt sat in a chair near the window, boots crossed, hat tipped low, cleaning his revolver by lamplight. Across the room, Lena lay on the narrow bed, though sleep hadn't touched her eyes. She turned restlessly, the blanket pulled up to her chin. Finally, her voice, hoarse, hesitant, broke the silence. "You ever lose everything, Mr. McGraw?" Colt looked up, his hand stilling on the cloth. He studied her, the way her eyes glimmered in the lamplight, but didn't quite meet his. "Yeah," he said simply. "Lost plenty. Folks, land, a few pieces of myself along the way." Her lips pressed tight, like she was weighing his words. Then, slowly, the story began to spill. "I wasn't always this." She lifted her frail hand, gesturing at her ragged dress. "My husband, he owned a ranch, big one, south of here. Thought he was giving me a life. Thought I was lucky. But a man with money don't always got kindness to match." Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "He drank, gambled, and when he lost, he took it out on me. Said I was cursed when I couldn't give him a child." The words dropped heavy between them, like stones in still water. Colt's jaw tightened, though his face gave little away. "So you ran." "I ran," she whispered. "Left everything. The land, the name, even the scraps of dignity I had left. Just gone." She shivered, curling in on herself. "But he'll never let go. He'll send his men. He'll drag me back if it kills me." The lamp hissed faintly, flame flickering. Colt leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You think I pity you, but I don't. Not one damn bit." His tone was low, rough but steady. "You walked out of hell. That don't make you weak. It makes you tougher than most men I've ever met." Lena's breath caught. No one had ever said that to her. For a moment, her eyes softened, the guarded walls around her cracking just enough for him to see the woman beneath the scars. But downstairs, laughter turned to shouts. A chair scraped across the saloon floor, and Colt's gaze snapped toward the door. Trouble was never far, and now he knew it wasn't just a saloon crowd. It was riding straight for Lena. She clutched the blanket tighter, fear pooling in her eyes. "It's starting already," she whispered. Colt holstered his revolver with a deliberate click and stood. His shadow stretched long in the lamplight as he looked at her. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Chapter 4, Blood on the Dust. Morning came harsh and unwelcomed. The prairie sun had barely cleared the horizon when the sound of hooves thundered into Dry Creek. From the upstairs window, Colt McGraw watched dust rise like smoke as 4 riders approached, their silhouettes sharp against the morning glare. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap. She didn't need to see their faces. She knew. Her breath quickened, eyes darting to Colt. "It's him," she whispered. "He sent them." Colt tugged his hat low, cinched his gun belt, and gave her a long, steady look. "Stay inside, no matter what." Downstairs, the saloon had gone quiet. Patrons huddling near the walls, cards forgotten, whiskey untouched. The riders pushed through the doors, spurs ringing like a challenge. Their leader, a scar-cheeked brute with a sneer, scanned the room until his eyes landed on Colt. "We're looking for a runaway," he drawled. "Boss wants her back. You hand her over, McGraw, and we'll be on our way." Colt leaned against the bar, cool and unbothered, his fingers tapping the rim of his glass. "Ain't no runaway here," he said. "Just a woman eating a meal in peace. And she ain't yours to claim." The brute laughed, though it was cold and humorless. "You always were a fool for lost causes." He nodded at his man. "Take her." Colt's hand moved faster than thought. His revolver cleared leather, hammer cocked, muzzle gleaming in the dim saloon light. The first gunman barely had time to draw before Colt's shot slammed him back into piano, strings screaming in protest. Chaos erupted. Patrons ducked, tables overturned, glass shattered. Lena, upstairs, pressed a hand to her mouth, heart hammering as gunfire cracked below like thunder. Colt moved with the precision of a man who'd lived too long with death at his heels. He fired, spun, dropped to one knee, and the saloon filled with smoke and dust. A second rider collapsed against the bar, whiskey pouring over him like blood. But a shot caught Colt in the shoulder, spinning him hard into a support beam. Pain burned hot, but he gritted his teeth, pushing up as the scar-cheeked brute advanced, revolver aimed square at his chest. "You should have stayed out of this, McGraw," the man hissed. From above, a voice broke through the smoke. "Colt!" Lena's cry rang clear, raw with fear. The sound gave him strength. Colt's hand steadied, eyes narrowing. In a single heartbeat, he fired. The brute staggered back, shock etched on his face before he crumpled to the floor, gun clattering uselessly beside him. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of lanterns and Lena's muffled sob upstairs. The survivors fled, spurs jangling as their boots pounded out the door. Colt stood in the haze, chest heaving, blood darkening his shirt. He holstered his revolver slow, then glanced up toward the stairs. "Reckon that's the last time anyone comes calling for you," he said, voice low but steady. And for the first time, Lena believed him. Chapter 5, Ashes and Embers. The saloon had emptied out by nightfall. Shattered glass crunched under boots, bullet holes scarred the walls, and the acrid smell of gunpowder clung to the air. Upstairs, in a room lit by a single flickering lamp, Colt McGraw sat slumped in a chair, shirt half torn, blood seeping through the bandage tied tight around his shoulder. Lena knelt beside him, her hand stained crimson where she'd pressed cloth against his wound. Her touch was gentle, but her eyes were fierce, unblinking even when he winced. "You're a fool," she whispered, voice trembling as she rinsed the cloth in the basin. "A damn stubborn fool. You could have been killed." Colt managed a crooked grin, though the pain made it tight. "Ain't the first time I've been shot. Won't be the last. Besides," he tilted his head, studying her through half-lidded eyes. "Worth it." The words caught her off guard. Her hand stilled, hovering above his chest. "Worth it," she echoed softly. "Keeping you free." His voice was rough, every syllable weighted. "That's worth a bullet or two." Her throat tightened, tears threatening though she fought them back. She leaned over him, carefully adjusting the bandage, but her fingers lingered longer than they needed to. For years she'd been treated as property, cast aside like broken glass. Yet here sat a man bleeding for her, without asking for a thing in return. You should hate me, she murmured. I brought nothing but trouble through your door. Colt's hand shot up suddenly, gripping her wrist. Not hard, but enough to stop her from retreating. His thumb brushed against her pulse, steady despite the storm in her voice. Listen here, he said, eyes locked on hers, fierce and unwavering. You didn't bring trouble. Trouble's been riding my trail since the day I was born. The only thing you brought me, he hesitated, jaw tight, as if the words themselves were dangerous, is something worth staying for. Lena's breath caught. The saloon below was silent now, the world holding still, the faint sound of coyotes drifting through the open window. In that quiet, her defenses crumbled. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his, her ragged hair brushing his cheek. You'll regret saying that, she whispered, though her voice shook with something close to hope. Colt gave a low chuckle, the sound rumbling through his chest. Darling, I've lived a life full of regrets. Don't reckon you'll be one of them. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two weary souls clinging to each other in the ashes of violence, finding warmth in the embers of something neither had dared believe in. Outside, the night stretched endless, but for the first time in years, Lena didn't feel hunted. She felt safe, and for Colt McGraw, bleeding and bruised, that was enough. Chapter 6, A Ring or a Ride. The dawn over Dry Creek bled gold across the prairie, stretching shadows long and thin across the dirt streets still scarred from the gunfight. The saloon was quiet now, windows patched with canvas, doors swinging gently in the morning breeze. On the hitching post outside, Colt McGraw's horse stamped impatiently, sensing the road calling. Colt stood by the animal, his arms still bound in bandages, hat low over his brow. He moved slower than usual, the wound pulling at his strength, but his stance was steady as ever, like a man who'd made up his mind. Behind him, the saloon doors creaked, and Lena stepped out. No longer the woman in rags he'd first passed on the road, though her dress was patched and plain. Her hair was combed, her eyes clear, her spine straight. She carried herself different now, not like a runaway, but like someone who'd found a reason to stand. You're leaving, she said softly, not an accusation, just truth laid bare in the dusty air. Colt tugged at the saddle cinch, not meeting her gaze. Never was one to linger long. Folks like me, we don't put down roots. He finally turned, his eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat. Unless we got a damn good reason. Lena's lips parted, breath catching. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The town hushed around them as if waiting. Colt stepped closer, boots grinding against the dirt, and tipped his hat back with his good hand. A slow grin tugged at his mouth, wry and dangerous all at once. Well, darling, he drawled, the same words he'd spoken the day they met. You still want a ride or a ring? The question hung heavy, not a tease this time, but a vow. Lena stared at him, tears brightening her eyes as the memory of that dusty road came rushing back. She thought of the night she'd trembled alone, the pain she'd endured, the shame she'd carried. And then she thought of Colt, bleeding for her, standing in front of death itself just to give her a chance. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she stepped forward and placed her hand in his, steady and sure. Both, she whispered at last, voice breaking with something like joy. Colt's grin widened, though his eyes softened. He gave her hand a squeeze, then swung into the saddle with his usual ease, even favoring his wound. With a firm tug, he pulled her up behind him. She fit there like she'd always belonged. The horse snorted, hooves striking the dirt as they turned toward the endless horizon. Behind them, Dry Creek watched in silence, knowing they'd witnessed the start of something rare, a legend born in dust, blood, and love. As the prairie wind swept over them and the sun climbed higher, Lena leaned against Colt's back, her arms around him. For the first time in years, The road ahead didn't terrify her. It felt like freedom, and together they rode into it. Two broken souls, bound by choice, stronger for it. The sun sank low, burning the horizon in shades of crimson and gold. The prairie stretched endless before them, wind rolling over the sagebrush, carrying the faint twang of a fiddle drifting from Dry Creek Saloon. Colt McGraw reined his horse to a slow halt on a ridge, the world behind him fading into dust and memory. Beside him, Lena rode steady, no longer the woman in rags he'd found on the roadside, but someone reborn. Her chin lifted, eyes alight with something fiercer than fear. For the first time, she didn't look over her shoulder. Colt watched her in the dying light, his own heart stirring in a way bullets and blood had never managed. "Never thought I'd find something worth staying for," he said, voice rough, edged with the truth of it. Lena turned, the wind lifting strands of her hair, and for once there was no hesitation in her smile. "Then don't just stay, Colt," she whispered. "Stay with me." He reached across the space between their saddles, taking her hand, dust and scars and all. The silence of the plains wrapped around them, broken only by the soft nickering of their horses. "Ride or ring, darling," Colt drawled, the faintest grin tugging at his lips. "I reckon it's both." And with her laughter mingling in the twilight, they urged their horses forward. Two silhouettes riding into the sunset, bound not by the road behind them, but by the promise of every horizon yet to come.